Just like I'd said earlier, some 13 years ago, on the 27th day of August 2010, Kenyans promulgated a new constitution. Kenyans declared the birth of a second republic. Where were you on that day? I can say I was at Uhuru Park actually covering that event, and it was a palpable event. The excitement, everything, people feeling that we have gotten to a place where after a long journey, Kenya has now a new constitution. We repealed the old constitution and adopted a new one. What happened? A new flag. A flag was hoisted at Uhuru Park. People were celebrating and chanting. Before this day, there had been a referendum. And before that referendum, there had been some heated campaign where some people had campaigned against the adoption of the draft constitution. That charge was led by religious leaders, particularly Christian churches, and some in the political class, including the current president, who was then a member of parliament, William Ruto. In this show tonight, we want to look at 13 years of the Constitution, and particularly looking at how it has fared, how it has served, and whether the fears of those who are campaigning against it have been addressed. Joining me on set is the Reverend Dr. Alphonse Kanga. He is the regional chair of the National Council of Churches of Kenya. Also, we have Vincent Kimosop, who is the secretary of the Kenya Christian Professionals Forum, and Diana Gishengo, national coordinator of the Institute for Social Accountability. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening. Good
night. I'm used to a good morning conversation all the time. Thank you very much for joining me on set. Asanteni sana.
You're welcome.
I want to start with you, Diana. You've been in this space where you're talking about social accountability, where, of course, everything that TISA does is looking at the implementation of the new constitution and ensuring that there is accountability at all levels of government. What is your feeling so far, 13 years after promulgation?
I think 13 years down the line, one, as TISA, we are grateful we have a constitution because it opened up the space for social accountability. Public participation is entrenched therein. Devolution now is a constitutional principle. Doesn't matter how much we want to run away from devolving power and resources, it will take a referendum to change the design and architecture of the constitution. However, increasingly, we feel the constitution, remember it was voted, it had a 67% majority. If we ever got to that level of presidential results, I'm sure that leader will have quite an easier time leading.
An overwhelming endorsement.
Exactly, because we've never gotten to that particular level. But when you look at the implementation of the Constitution, and I'm just trying to run through every single chapter, including the Republic, they even calls for secession right now. There's not a single chapter that feels is driven by our political class to implement it willingly. A number of chapters led by the leadership and the integrity chapter, the land chapter, devolution even in public finance. Most of them feel like they are imposed on the current political leadership, and increasingly in the last 6 years, we are seeing a strong push to claw back the gains that we have made, including around the Bill of Rights. People are wondering, did we want these human rights in Kenya? We voted for them. So we've made good strides, but there's a lot of the center holding too much power and people being very, very accustomed to the old way of doing things and running away from the rule of law.
Okay. I want to bring in the two gentlemen from NCCK and the Kenya Christian Professionals Forum. In the run-up to the referendum, your organizations had serious concerns about the constitution. I'm going to quote some of the things that were said then. Oliver Kisaka, who was a top official of the National Council of Churches of Kenya, has said, "We believe the constitution draft does not meet religious, moral, economic, and justice concerns. It privileges one religion over another. It allows abortion on demand. It has strong socialist tendencies," he said. The Kenya Catholic bishops put it more bluntly, saying, and even releasing a full color leaflet with a red traffic light over the words, "Stop, think, choose life." The Anglicans had said, "We say no to the proposed constitution because unless it's amended to answer their concerns about justice and equality for all religions, limitation of fundamental rights based on religion, protection of the right to life, and the supremacy of the Constitution in the right of international conventions and treaties. Several issues here that are being raised, and I want to start with you, Reverend. The issue of abortion was a big contentious issue. The issue of, whether the Constitution expressly allows for abortion. The issue of the Catholic courts was also another big contentious issue that was raised by the Christian churches. And also, of course, even at a professional level, the issue of international treaties being automatically becoming Kenyan law and whether that affected our sovereignty. Let's start with those concerns that were raised directly by the church. 13 years down the road, do you still look back and see that you had legitimate concerns?
Yes, let me begin by saying is that the NCCK plus the other religious bodies, we agreed that there were issues to be dealt with before we passed that constitution. And you have just mentioned them: abortion, Catholic courts, and other issues that really bothered us at that time. And then there was a move that says, oh, let's pass it and then we deal with it later. And so what did we do? As good Democrats, we realized there's a majority the majority spoke. When they spoke, we agreed, okay, let's move on. And then we took advantage. We started a move now to educate people, the civil society, into the content of what was passed. Apart from our needs, we had issues. And then we said, okay, let's hold on these issues so that we can educate the community on content of what's in this constitution. And then we started moving. And for sure, between that time and this time, our issues are still there. But remember, there was the issue that let's pass and then turn around and
we shall address them as we move.
We address them as we move.
Are those concerns still as strong today? I mean, having experienced and lived the Constitution for 13 years, do you still feel that inclusion of Catholic courts in the Constitution was actually affecting you?
They have not been handled. They are still there.
But is it a concern now?
It is a concern. It is a concern. But we agreed that there are other strong issues to deal with as they are there. We have not wrapped them. They have not been erased. They are still standing there. But we agreed, let's hold them there so that we can go for the best of the rest of us. But now that the threat to this constitution is that it is great. There are issues that we have benefited. For example, we have benefited in terms of devolution. Devolution has done great. Devolution has done something that would not have been done in the Republic for many years. So that one, we are glad about it. But what we addressed that time is still there. And then we said we were going to deal with it later. But surprisingly, the people that said, let's just pass it, and then we are going to amend, they are the same people now. We are going to adjust. They are now the same people that are saying, let us actually go and work it all across. They are now saying, let's go and amend the Constitution.
Let's amend the good parts. Yes. They are not even talking about amending what you had raised as concerns.
Yeah, they are not talking about that. That's not what we are surprised of right now in the community. But are those things still there? They are still there. They are issues that we need to agree as a family, as a Kenyan family, that we do. Now, the other biggest problem is that whereas for 13 years, there are things that worked very well, devolution worked very well. But as my friend here said, you see, there are issues that has not been worked on. For example, the issue of corruption, wage bill, chapter 6 has not been worked on. Corruption has got haywire. Misuse of power is still there. How are we going to deal with it? We need to come together as a nation and say, yes, we celebrate devolution that has worked very well. But there are those issues, misuse of power, wage bill.
When you say misuse of power, can you give us specific examples where you feel there has been misuse of power?
There are issues. There are issues right now. There are issues in the system. There are people who are taking advantage. There are people who have said issues that are not supposed to be spoken in the public.
Like what?
Many statements have come across where people say that they own the country. When you get power and you think you own the country.
Oh, the shareholder statement.
All those things have come out.
Is that a constitutional issue?
It's not a constitutional issue, but it's the misuse of power. It's the misuse of power, right. The corruption that have gone haywire in different places, and then there's the animal in the house. which the constitution need to speak to? The election in the country. The general election.
We'll come back to that.
That's an animal in the house.
Vincent, pick it up from here.
First of all, I think, Eric, I want to say that we were the technical arm that was providing support to the faith fraternity in actually, it's way back from 2005, because the journey towards Kenya getting a constitution cannot just be left to a 2010 duration. There is a journey towards it. And I think it is good we also give Kenyans context to the debate. In principle, Eric, the church did not say no to the constitution. If you look at the investment and the contribution historically from the statement of Njoya 88, you're looking at the opposition to Mlolongo voting system, the support for repeal of Section 2A. What happened is that when it got to 2010, is that, and starting from 2005, there were specific provisions that the church felt uncomfortable to be able to endorse the document. And in the faith space, Eric, we normally have this persuasion that on matters of principle, be firm as a rock, and on matters of preference, be flexible. So in this situation, for example, when it comes to an issue of abortion, as people who are persuaded by conviction and faith, having a provision on Article 26(4) that says that abortion is not permitted unless that qualification as a person of a faith who has endorsed the preamble of the Constitution that provides, acknowledges the supremacy of the Almighty God. Therefore, it does not matter any other preferential issues. If, for example, on a cardinal issue like this, then as a faith person, your declaration of statement that I may agree with the other issues on devolution, the judiciary, you know, all the other chapter 18, but on such an issue, when it comes to Article 32 on issues of religious freedoms, when you look at Article 45, the family, I'm just highlighting the core issues that led to then the position of no. It was 2.5, which was international, the 2.5, which was the issue of domestication of international treaties, and then you went to Article 26(4), then you 32, and then 45. Those were the primary issues. On the issues of the Catholic courts was the issue around the equality of religions. Basically, that was the reason that their position was, as technically as professionals, we were then persuaded to tell the Christian fraternity that voting no is a statement of faith. Now, because also we live in a country whereby when a decision by the majority has been taken, that we have a responsibility to then abide by the cardinal rule that remains. Now, you asked the question to the bishop at the beginning that are these issues still the same? Do they remain pertinent until now? And I will tell you the answer is yes. In fact, at the Kenya Christian Professionals Forum, we have drafted a constitutional amendment bill called Linda Jamii Constitutional Amendment to address those issues. Okay. And we are proposing in the legislation, we are proposing amendment of Article 2 on national values to introduce, for example, an issue like family values. We are proposing the removal of Article 2.5 on domestication of international treaties. We are also making amendment to Article 26(4), Article 32, and Article 45. That is our amendment. We had made these proposals to the BBI process. We also have made submissions. We are waiting, actually, even under the bipartisan process. And part of our marking of the 13th year of Katiba 13 is the beginning of signature collections, because we believe that in a democracy where, as the majority have their way, the minority are also given the opportunity to have their say, because in principle, there is enough evidence to demonstrate it was not an opposition to us having a new constitution. It was an opposition to certain
specific provisions of the draft
of the draft then.
Let's
Allow
look
me
at this,
to just
Vincent.
say there's some, if you could,
Okay.
that there are also benefits, yes, out of this 13 years duration. They've talked about devolution. They've talked about the other issues. I think for me, I would want to highlight certain issues. Look at the independence of the judiciary. If you remember in 2002, I think that was around 2010, the then president, the late Mwai Kibaki, made 4 appointments. The control of the budget, the CJ, the DPP, and the judiciary actually said no. So that journey of independence of the judiciary, today you can see clearly that in 10 years down the line, even for the first time across the world, you have a country that has overturned a presidential election. That is credit to our constitution. I think even the BBI process, the stopping of that process was credit to the constitutional framework. And then one final thing, Latif, the constitution still remains as a symbol of national unity. Yeah. Today, across the board, if you listen to the political divides, to professionals' engagement, the testament that still speaks as a body of unity, in fact, even in the debate we're having now, is still on the constitution, which I think is something to be celebrated.
I think, just to be clear, and it's important that you've also raised this, as Democrats, as people who went to participate in that referendum, yes, it was very clear that there are people who are going to vote no, and there are people who are going to vote yes. The majority's will was going to carry the day. Yes. And nobody should be penalized or ostracized because of the choice that they made.
And that's one.
But then we've got to look back and ask ourselves, so in hindsight, did we make the right choice or did we make the wrong choice? And that's what we're having a conversation around here. All right? Yes. The areas that you raised, if we take the issue of abortion, Vincent, you are strong on the provision of the Constitution on abortion, despite the fact that it had said abortion is not permitted unless when the opinion of a qualified medical professional is the one that gives a nod to this. If you look back at the last 13 years and then look at the previous 13 years before the Constitution, would you say that there is a change in our society because of this particular clause in the Constitution?
The High Court ruling in Malindi, that actually clearly the judge, based on Article 26(4), read clearly that actually abortion is a right. You already have a court ruling based on the strength of that. As we are speaking at the Kenya Christian Professionals Forum, we are actually a party to the case, so we will not discuss the merit. There is already a court ruling that actually is hinged on the strength of that provision. The case is at the High Court level.
The argument then was that because of this clause, and Doctor, you can come in, because of this clause, we are encouraging promiscuity and laws of our values. Have we done that? Yes. Have we seen that our society is now very open and willing to just procure abortions or loss of our moral values because of this?
The issue is, it is in the Constitution. We are a progressive society. The youngsters are in schools. They are in the universities. So long as it is there, it gives them permission and they can challenge you using that. Has it been there? Yes, in different dimension. If you come to us who work in a religious community, in churches and parishes and all that, we'll tell you it is there. And the youngsters will look at you and tell you, Pastor, it are for a constitutional right. Our constitution is our own, is to defend me. And it is there. It's our baby. It's not for you alone, it's for all of us. And so even that youngster who is there, when he's in a mess, he knows, yes, this has happened, but I have a right to do this. We were looking for something that can bring us together as a religious community so that our faith system will be structured theological as what we understand that God's intended to. And so when you leave it there, we cannot leave it there and say it is okay, and then go and tell a young person in a counseling room that you have done is not okay. So long as it's there, there is something wrong that we need to sit together, as he said, and find out. what are we going to do about it? And so even now, we need to look forward and say, yes, the great things have happened in this constitution. And when it was passed democratically, we all agreed. And we turned around and said, because the majority of Kenyans have agreed, we turn around and support it. And if anything, train other Kenyans now on the content.
I'm not hearing a direct answer to the question. Since 2013,
is it there?
Would you cite cases where there has been procurement of abortion and you could say it is either because of malpractice by the medical professionals, or because there was somebody who just went and said, doctor, I want an abortion. You're supposed to procure an abortion because I have a right in the Constitution. Are we saying that the Constitution has actually promoted abortion?
Yeah, that's why I'm telling you that I work in a religious office. These issues come. I might not be able to mention on the national TV, I cannot mention names, but they are there. The youngsters are smart enough from the schools. There are issues we have stood as we do marriage counseling as pastors in the pastor office and tell him, the Bible says no, the Constitution says no. But now you cannot face a youngster and tell him, the Bible says no. You tell him, yes, the Bible says no, but the Constitution agrees. And so that's why we are saying, please, let's do things that are moral right, theological right, in our own understanding so that we can be together as a nation. Especially at this time when we are talking of cults. Even cults have used the same.
To advance the same. I want to hear from Diana. You are in the civil society space.
Yes.
Focusing on the issue of abortion. What have you heard?
What have I heard? Two things. One is the biggest problem is not access to abortion. Is the high number of deaths from unsafe abortions. Unsafe abortions.
Which means?
So if we provide safe abortions to girls and mothers, we will save more life as opposed to when we completely criminalize.
But the Constitution doesn't even allow that.
The Constitution allows doctors to help us make a judgment. Now, the case that was yes,
the life of the mother
is in
baby
danger.
In danger.
In danger.
Not choice of.
Not choice. It is. We are not at pro-choice.
I want to have an abortion.
Yes.
Okay.
And which was even a consensus to try and accommodate a dominant religious fraternity in Kenya. That is why there was that concession, not allowing mothers, women to decide what they do with their bodies. Now, during this particular period of implementation, we've even been unfortunate to the extent that doctors were not allowed or did not have medical guidelines to save any mother who had procured an unsafe abortion because the guidelines were withdrawn because of the pressure of the religious community. That is doublespeak. If we are about preserving life, we must preserve life through and through. Whether you are considered a sinner or the most faithful person, we must preserve life through and through. So if we are to have that discussion, we must have it in proper context. Can we allow medics to guide us around issues of sexual and reproductive health?
So are you saying that the religious sector has actually hampered implementation of this particular clause of the Constitution?
Yes, in a very, very significant way. When they say there was democracy, no, they have pushed and written several times, and they have significant clout in this country. And that has affected the implementation. And I'm not even saying procuring, saving a life. Somebody who is dying from excessive bleeding because they procured an unsafe abortion. And most of these people will be minors. They did not take the decision themselves. That decision was taken on their behalf. But now they cannot be rescued. And that was the foundation of the Malindi case. I think one of the things which is a constitutional principle and which everybody, whether they belong to a faith or not, through their conscience agree, is that we must always apply a do no harm principle. And ultimately, I think today we've quoted theology, and dogma and things like that, they have their place. They are taught in seminaries. Constitution is not about morality. If we
what is
have...
it about?
It is.
It is not...
is.
My turn, Kimosop?
Yeah.
My turn, Kimosop.
Sorry.
Yes.
What is it about?
Apologies.
The Constitution
Apologies.
defines in the same one preamble, okay, and that is background. It recognizes that we shall be governed by human rights, rule of law. It does not say religious belief. Religious belief is a right that we respect, but the one that is interdependent with other rights. Our values and principles in the Constitution are in Article 10, very, very clearly stipulated. If we go through them and now analyze the clauses that have been cited here, including 26, 45, we need to contrast them against the national values and principles. If we wanted religious belief to be part of it, that is where that ought to have been anchored. And look, Constitution is interpreted through the operations of government in courts and so on. Bibles, Qurans, and other holy books are interpreted in other spaces. If religious leaders have failed to get to the conscience of Kenyans, of the youth, let them not attack the Constitution. Let them check their own methods and why people are not listening. Maybe the delivery method needs to change. Probably at that point,
needs to help them.
I am not very sure that that's the case. When we discuss underage sex, what is the solution? It is already happening. The courts are already ahead. They have decided that we will not do harm to our children. When they are found culpable, we will consider them children in need of care and protection. Embrace them, not condemn them. The church, the religious leaders have condemned so many people that we feel so condemned. When I was younger, I am happier with the Constitution or the liberalism that is availed.
Okay, Diana.
I think let's get. I think it's good to have context to the conversation. The discussion on abortion, in my view, I would if we had to get proper context, I would recuse myself to some extent. That maybe get medical experts and everything. The only match I can have a conversation confidently, being a professional, is to the level of the definition. And the conversation we have within the KCPF fraternity is the definition of willful termination of life. That is the operational definition we use as to why we are saying no. My conversations with the teams that and colleagues in the medical fraternity is that doctors are trained on how to save lives. Actually, I have had conversations, Diana, with the medical doctors in KCPF who have actually performed of terminated lives to save mothers, because that is part of their professional training. So what therefore the consensus when we were having this conversation in 2010 is that when you then elevate the willful termination, that's our operational definition of how I get to the conversation. That is when, from a faith perspective, we take the position that the sanctity of life. And I want to say something just to respond to what my colleague Diana said, is that the true operational framework of anyone in the faith space is love. When people move to the space, Diana, of condemnation, they have already crossed the boundary, because God himself is what? Is love. So one of the things that, and that's what I'm saying, when we leave the conversation at the principal position, people may fail. You've quoted cults, or what is it? The things that are happening in the faith space. The truth of the matter is that just in the same way where you have even rogue journalists, it cannot be the standard for everybody in a space. Just because some people have made fallen short and condemned people, the true operational framework, Diana, is that young person who is pregnant. I may not agree with the decision, or they may have been in such a situation, but there are still people created in the image of God. So that for me is where I would want to have the conversation.
Okay.
Then finally, just want to broaden this conversation, is as a result of having the conversation and allowing the decision in 2010, Latif, we also see the benefits of that, the 33%, if I remember, engaging in the process. For example, as a result of the concern of Article 2.5 on domestication of international treaties, I remember in Parliament, there is the Ratification of Treaties Act that was passed. So that then, because that concern was raised, then there is a clear law on how Kenya ratifies treaties. And that's the benefit of broadening in that conversation. Right. I also want to point out that when we look at other laws that have come in the process, the ones governing marriages, the one that governs culture, the one governing, there is even a draft policy that is at the cabinet level called the Family Promotion and Protection Policy. So, and then finally, I pointed out, Eric, that we also have the Linda Jamii constitutional amendment bill that we have put on the table. Now, the reason why it is good to appreciate these engagements, Latif, is that shaping a society requires different dimensions, different tools. One of them is the culture of those people. The other thing requires the issue of laws, the policies that you make. All these are part of the instruments that form the shaping of a country. For example, we raised an issue on governance that has remained a concern in this country. We pointed out in 2010 that the opposition has not been well facilitated to play its role in governance. And one of the things that has plagued the country from the elections in 2013, 2017, and 2022 is that there is no incentive. There is no incentive for the person who becomes number two. So, and those are issues that we put on the table. Of course, they did not get to the threshold of abortion, religious issues, but they were part of the broader conversation in 2010. That one thing that I will encourage anyone is that we should also avoid the conversation of we versus them when we are having this discussion, so that we can move our country forward.
The context on which, and I'll come to you shortly, we're having this tonight's conversation is as we mark 13 years of this constitution on Sunday, we must also appreciate that we are definitely going for amendments to this constitution soon. It's clear.
We are waiting. In fact, one of the reasons
why it started as soon, barely 4 years into the constitution, there was already a move, Okoa, Kenya.
It was Okoa, Kenya, yes.
That gathered
and then
there was a Punda Mechoka, Moses Kuria.
Punda Mechoka was...
Punguza Mizigo, again, just the other day, we had the BBI last year. The conversation that's happening now with these bipartisan talks, there is mention of the... So we are heading there. And if we are not prepared, then we will be having some convoluted arguments at the wrong time. And that's why we must start having these conversations now. Now, I want you to conclude on the matter of abortion, then we can move on to something else.
No, I just want to conclude by saying this. The intention of religious saying no because of this issue of abortion, what we had in mind is that we need to have a constitution and begin on the level where we agree that man is a balanced man is both mind, spirit, and soul. You cannot have a man who is mentally mature, physically mature, but spiritually immature. And so on the area of spirituality, we have some issues that he wanted to make sure that they are clear, abortion being one of them. And because of that insincerity, because of not trusting one another as Kenyans, that is why after a short time, we are saying we want to change the whole thing. And one of the things that we needed to deal with clearly, Wapenzi, as Kenyans, is Chapter 6. If we implemented Chapter 6, some of those things are going to be in place. But we said no to abortion because there was no way as religious in the country we are going to say yes when we know that this thing, as far as spirituality is concerned, there's a problem here. That's why we oppose now.
Given a choice, would you like to delete that clause in the Constitution?
We have in the Linda Katiba.
As
This is what you're
yesterday.
bringing in the Linda Jamii.
Yes, sorry, in the Linda Jamii, amendment, I've pointed out all the issues that the church raised. I'll share a copy.
You want to revisit?
No, not revisit. You see, you know the Roe versus Wade decision in the US.
Yeah.
The decision was done in the 50s, and there were people who were not happy with that decision. And what happened? They put in the work over 50 years of work that actually led to the overturning of that decision. So one of the reasons why the Kenya Christian professionals exist is that we want to right the wrongs that we believe there were oversights when we went to the referendum, and we're very happy actually. Like in 3 years, when the Okoa Kenya signature collection started, we have been waiting on the flanks because
For
we
anybody
also
who's collecting signatures, you want to put
no, what happened?
I want to ask the issue
sorry.
of equality of religion.
Yes.
Again, hindsight 2020. Reverend Dr. Kanga, the issue of the Catholic courts being included or mentioned specifically in the Constitution, has it had any impact on the equality of religion in this country? Is it something that we need to look again at?
I want to begin from where he said that the things we said no, we have lived with them for the sake of peace and unity of the nation.
Not that you're
but
comfortable.
not because they are right. Principle. We begin from there. They are still there, but we accept for the sake of peace, love, and unity. That's why we agree. But for sure, it is good to be balanced. Whether the Catholic courts, for example, there is no will tell me that it is balanced because the Catholic courts they do their thing, and the Christian they don't have their courts, because we live in the same country where the Muslim marries a Muslim marries a Christian and a Christian marries a Muslim, and we are together. And so the biggest confusion is that I don't think if my daughter gets married to a Muslim, I will want that case to be done by a sheikh. I will want it to go to the court of law. And so it will create confusion. For the sake of confusion, let's have one thing or people be given different. Is there imbalance? Yes. Even now there's imbalance. But we agree because we live in the same country, things should not go my way.
In 2010, it was a deal breaker for you. If we were to have another referendum this year or next year, would it be a deal breaker again, the inclusion of Catholic courts in the Constitution?
It will come up as a challenge. It will be a challenge again.
It was a deal breaker in 2010. Would it be a deal breaker today?
That and others. It will be that and others will still be a challenge.
It still remains as an issue.
It still remains as an issue that we need to deal with. For sure, they were critical thought by our professionals, and we, from the spiritual point of it. And as I said, so long as a man is not balanced in those three areas, mentally mature, spiritually mature, and physically mature, there is a challenge there.
We have left it in the Linda Jamii constitutional amendment bill. We haven't touched it. What has happened is that other issues have emerged that we need stronger collaboration with our brothers in the Muslim fraternity. For example, the issue of LGBTQ is here. And that's an issue we are on the same page. So what happens from a strategic perspective, Eric?
Okay.
There's
strike a compromise here.
No. Remember, I told you nation building is a journey.
Yes.
And remember, there are things that are it's good to put it outside there. So because when the conversation on the Linda Jamii constitutional amendment bill comes to the table, these questions will arise. So integrity requires us to actually front the issues ahead of time so that you would understand, for example, why was it a concern that time? It is not a concern now. It's because we see things that that have emerged, like the recent Supreme Court ruling on the issue of registration of what's the name of this thing? The organization that advocates for gay rights. that united both Christians and Muslims, because on that issue we see it. So when it comes to therefore amending the constitution, you realize that even the issues that the Catholic courts that addresses are pretty issues we can live with them. I must be open in saying this ahead of time. But when it comes to LGBTQ, the issues of abortion, those issues we are on the same page, and we'd expect part of those who will champion this Linda Jamii from the fraternity.
Exit Catholic courts and LGBTQ debate.
And you can see it, the journey from 2010 to where we are at, that has found, yes.
Dana,
Yes.
as in the civil society, well, the concern then was being raised by particularly the religious side and the religious sector, and some political players who were raising issues still touching on religion and morals and ethics. But many of those who were saying yes were not saying yes, but.
Yeah.
But basically just saying yes,
Yes.
right? Is there a but?
Right now.
Yes.
Is it a but? No. No, and I would be personally very concerned based on all the initiatives that we have seen around a but. Definitely, we do not have a perfect constitution, but fairly good. The principles are good. Most of the areas are covered. If we even got to 90% of the implementation, we would have made strides. But Eric, you cannot deny me the opportunity to comment on Catholic courts, despite the consensus. Catholic courts is clearly a principle of equality and non-discrimination, where you're making reasonable accommodation of people who would not ordinarily benefit from access to justice if they used the courts as they are. And it's very specific. For criminal acts, for civil issues, they come to face the law the same way we do. But because of the foundation of Islamic law around family, inheritance, marriage, and so on, it becomes very, very difficult to interpret that particular set of circumstances by somebody who does not understand Islamic law. So when we make reasonable accommodation, become more accommodative and tolerant, that should be considered as progress. And what I hope to see is more reasonable accommodation. There have been initiatives by the judiciary around resolving disputes, particularly for pastoralist communities. Again, you want to find a community whose cattle has been stolen. You give them a monetary price, that is not considered redress.
Yeah.
So the judiciary, if I am the judge in that community and where I was raised, money is good enough compensation. I will be furthering an injustice. So I hope we can grow in that particular process.
Is this a roundabout way of you saying reasonable accommodation and then LGBTQ comes in?
By the way, we have a very good constitution. A very, very good constitution that has been very, very well interpreted. The LGBTQ community are sexual and gender minorities. Our court, the High Court decision, was asked. The High Court, the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court decision. The question was, are LGBTQ persons before the law? Therefore, they ought to enjoy fundamental rights and freedoms. Are they persons? Yes. Do they have capillaries, blood, and everything? Yes. Even within the minority rulings, that was the question. Nothing else. Are they persons capable or deserving of constitutional protection? Yes. Article 27, are the grounds exhaustive? No. What has been the interpretation of the definition of sex? It's very expansive. It is the sexual act, it is male, female, intersex, and we've made significant strides there. It is sexual orientation, and that has been interpreted by courts, including our African Commission. I won't quote Australia or South Africa that has it expressly in their constitution. But these are gender and sexual minorities. Is there a problem of us accepting that? Yes, the community is not very tolerant of this community. But are they persons? Yes. Do they require protection? Yes. So when we legislate at the constitutional level to deny anybody their human dignity, then I think we'll have retrogressed so far. And what happens is, all the time, attacks on equality and non-discrimination and human dignity begin from the margins. People who everybody would agree, this one's no. Then with time, we will move to the next marginal community. Within no time, hate and different forms of phobia will be the norm in society. Is that what we wanted? No. I have worked with several marginalized communities. It always starts with resistance. But I do love that even the religious leaders agree that God is love.
That everybody deserves love.
And everybody deserves love. I hope we can have that particular discussion. And in terms of the legal...
This is a hot one.
And in terms of legal protection, whenever there are sexual offenses that touch on defilement of boys and girls, that is adequately covered by the Sexual Offences Act. Whenever there is rape of men and women, that is very, very adequately covered by the Sexual Offences Act. Let us allow the criminal element deal with that differently. Identity and human dignity, let us protect at
and
all.
morality.
Those who are sick,
Treat them.
Erica,
using medical evidence.
Vincent, Linda Jameen, what are you proposing on the question of LGBTQ?
Of course, so when you look at Article 27, the one that you've quoted, which talks about grounds that the state cannot discriminate on, what we see is that in the Supreme Court's decision, that was Eric Gitari versus the NGO Coordination Council, is that we actually see an expansionist interpretation of Article 27. Because the Constitution says that you cannot discriminate on the ground of sex. What we actually have in the determination from the Supreme Court is actually they expanded the interpretation of what sex to include sexual orientation. Let me be abundantly clear here that this is what we are against. Is the ideology around sex and reproductive health, which we see heavily supported by the big farm because of business. And this is not a campaign and a condemnation against individuals. It is, we are clearly pinpointing out what this ideology will do in terms to our society and also to our values and the things that we hold dearly as a country. So why therefore our fears of 2010 are confirmed is, if you look, it is the same person who went to court to actually challenge the file a case on the freedom of association of persons who identify as LGBTQ. It is also the same person who went to court to challenge the provisions on the penal code, I think 162, the one that talks about that criminalize sodomy. Why? Because when you remove the Kenyan context and you see how these ideas evolved globally, it's the same tactics, the same practices. On this side, you expand these rights, but you go through the courts, not through legislative processes. So Why we then raise the flag as a fraternity within the KCPF circles is that we know the harm that this does to societies. Because in our preamble, we've said we acknowledge the supremacy of the Almighty God. For a people of faith, which we are not, which we celebrate in our country, including even our national anthem, we know very clearly that He created the male and female. So for us, that is how we see it, and we see how over 3,000 history that has preserved society over time. When we start tinkering with the things and the pillars that form a society, that is when we become concerned, and we are pointing out clearly here that let us separate issues. If somebody has said that I am practicing these issues, the practice, you separate the practice and the person. So that, for example, if we see police officers meting injustice on individuals because of their practices, you're able to isolate the violence from the individual, so that you are consistent in pointing out why the ideology is wrong. So what for us, we are amending Article 2.5 of the Constitution, because we see the importation of those interpretations outside.
So what are you amending it to say?
We are repealing section Article 2.5 of the one that ratifies international, the domestication of international treaties. We are also expanding the national values to include family values, so that we can secure our interpretation. Then we are also amending Article 27. 4, the one that points out clearly the grounds for non-discrimination, because as she has said, it is not limiting. We want to make sure that...
So you want to limit?
Not limit, to clarify that it does not include sexual orientation, which we have seen the Supreme Court has interpreted that sex to include what? Sexual orientation, which we are fearing even now with the High Court, Court of Appeal case, because the anti-sodomy case is currently at the Court of Appeal. Now, since the Supreme Court has already given an indication, anyway, it's a matter before court. Let me leave it at that.
As far as I'm concerned, the Constitution is so clear, and I'm not a lawyer. From a layman's point of it, the Constitution clears that we the people. And then with the people that live in this particular environment, this particular area, we have given ourselves this document. And this document defines culture is man's effort to organize his or her society. Now we have organized our society to live in this particular area. And in the same culture, we defined who is crazy and who is not crazy, who is mad and who is not mad. And how do we define? We define as per our spirituality, our worldview of he who will bring in issues that are not even in creation. So long as we bring in issues that are wrong in creation before God.
So we've defined what's normal and what's abnormal.
What's normal, what's abnormal?
As a society.
Yes, as a society. So what's abnormal is...
But now, do we need to define that in the Constitution? Because I hear that's what Vincent is saying.
Which one?
If we actually get into that amendment of the clause, we will start now going to granular and saying, this we consider normal. Anything beyond this will be considered
you don't need
some things
abnormal.
some things are left to statutes. For example, the Article 2.5 of the Constitution that domesticates international treaties. Once you repeal it, you don't need to stay. You don't need a statute for it. Or if you will have a statute, but that spells out how you ratify treaties. Which will still stand as law, but it will not be automatic. Yes. So part of the, I think. But now on the issue,
what we are talking about is he is saying we as a society, we have our own definitions of things that we do. We have culturally, we have defined who's sane, who's insane. We cannot decide what's normal and what's abnormal.
My question is, do I need to go to school to know that in this culture, this is a nose and this a mouth? And then when you tell me that the nose can be the mouth, and then I still say that you're okay because you have logic, does that define anything? For example, in this particular area, when you tell me that there's a specific behavior that can be accepted because of the law, and you want to tell me that it's not crazy, you are not mad, I need to ask my culture, our area, you have a problem.
I would hate to go into abnormalities because, again, when you even think about mental disability and most forms of disability, they are considered abnormal in our culture. The wording used is abnormality. But we have grown over time to realize difference is not necessarily abnormal. And that is the essence of living Article 27, not exhaustive. Because I work, for instance, with stateless people. They are not covered under Article 27 expressly. But they are a community that is significantly discriminated in this country. Should we leave them to their different
behavior?
No. That then becomes very, very distinct. And I think world over, issues of minorities have never been resolved democratically. In most instances, you either get a special tribunal or you go to judicial interpretation, guided by values. But because the societal norms is driven by the majority. And what this does all the time is, whenever we deal with any minority or marginalized group, we deny them all the resources. So if you are to do any analysis on any category of marginalized group and assess how they access fundamental rights, essential services, you would find that most of them are significantly affected. And I think we had made very, very good progress in this country, starting with intersex. Look at what we did with COVID, accommodating intersex and transgender persons. So I think let's embrace a sense of tolerance and inclusion. Let's discuss our moral fabric without taking away anybody's dignity, because that denies them access to societal services.
We shall get into that conversation at the appropriate time, because clearly we will be heading into this conversation. I want to conclude tonight's show, but I want to ask each one of you.
Yes.
Clearly we are seeing conversations that are shepherding us towards a constitutional amendment.
Yes.
We saw it in the BBI. There was a matter that was taken to court, and up to the Supreme Court, they agreed that the approach was wrong in attempting to amend the Constitution.
The president initiated.
We are seeing this time, another conversation that's taking place, and some of the content touch on possibility of amending the Constitution. Where is the faith sector? Where is the civil society voice in this conversation? I want to start with you, civil society.
Where is the voice of the media?
Where is your voice?
Eric, without a doubt, no constitution lives as is promulgated. We always enhance constitutions based on the societal needs and their assessment. We are headed for a constitutional moment. As civil society, we are aware, and there are clauses that we would like to introduce, including, it should be easier for us to recall leaders who do not subscribe to the contract between the people and based on the Constitution. It would be important to strengthen devolution and how resources are shared. Probably reconsider how we strengthen our independent commissions. There are so many areas of strengthening. The leadership and integrity chapter that has always been subjected to standards of criminal liability as opposed to ethical standards would be a good one to strengthen. So as civil society, if the Constitution is opened, it should be to strengthen good governance.
Okay.
However, we worry very, very much, and that's why most of the time we protect the Constitution from many amendments. Because over the years, what is always introduced undermines the high standards we set for ourselves, and we are now lowering them. So that remains a concern.
The Institute for Social Accountability was among the parties that took the matter of BBI all the way to the Supreme Court. It's important to mention that. We know that the religious sector already has a draft that you're working on as the professionals, that you will take to the pastors and bishops for further conversation. Where do you stand?
We gave ourselves a constitution to govern us 13 years ago. And we have seen within that constitution, there is an animal in the house. First of all, we created what we call the Commission to Implement the Constitution, a great paper. By that commission, the Nyachais Commission, we did not get the outcome of that, how to be implemented. We did not even get the structure on how they wanted to implement it. So there are issues as we have tried to implement, they have created an animal or hell in the house. And there is this issue, the animal in the house of the winner take it all. And this one has been an animal every 5 years. There is no way we are going to live with this animal all through with the winner take it all, like at this particular time where you have somebody getting 6 million, another one gets 6 million, and then you get somebody who got 200, becomes a member of parliament and gets paid, and the person went home with 6 million and the other 6 billion is in the court. Then we realize, as per where we are, whether we call democracy, we need to think critically.
So it's time to have a conversation.
We need to have a conversation on the table, set the agenda and say, how are you going to manage? We cannot fight after 5 years.
Okay. Enough, Reverend Dr. Khan.
Thanks. I think happy birthday to the Katiba. We are actually at the Kenya Christian Professions Forum going to have a Katiba Day. We have been celebrating this every 28th of August. On the table, we have put our draft constitutional amendment bill called Linda Jamii to speak to the issues that the church and the faith community were concerned in 2010. But now, in addition to, just to reiterate what has been shared, is that we also want to revisit the issue of, we have Kenyans who talk so much about rights, but they don't talk about responsibilities. This was a clause that was there in the WACO draft, where there was the rights of Kenyans, but also responsibilities of Kenyans. We also want to see that this issue of winner take it all is addressed, but also loses all in terms of having a broadened executive. We support the introduction of the position of Prime Minister and 2 deputies, and also the office of leader of official opposition, because we see their value in terms of what they do. We also need to have a discussion, Eric, about the cost of representation. When you look at the size of our country, the size of our economy, and the number of elected leaders, we need to have an internal reflection as a country. And then finally, is the whole issues of we have so many institutions that are playing almost similar roles. If you look at public service, Salaries and Remuneration Commission, parliamentary service, judicial service, teacher service, all these are public service. Do we require all these independent institutions to be to deliver on the mandate of Kenyans? And that is why our recommendation is the conversation on bipartisan should actually take a multi-sectoral approach. Let's have as many voices speaking to the process, so that out of this, it's not just the political class that wins, but Kenya that wins.
Thank you very much.
A quick question, just before we conclude. Is it really necessary for we to have 2 systems where we have the former provincial administration and the governors running? I was privileged recently to go around the counties doing the other work. And then I get here is the county commission office. Yeah. And then here is the governor. Governors. If you go to the governor's office, those governors, they live like kings. If you go to all the county commissioner's office, they live like paupers. Do we need them? Or we need to have a constitution that will have one area, save the money, and run the country faithfully?
Why are we increasing the health budget?
Big questions.
At
The
national
Reverend
level.
Dr. Alphonse Kanga is the regional chair of the National Council of Churches of Kenya. Vincent Kimosop, secretary of the Kenya Christian Professional Forum, and Diana Geshengo, national coordinator at the Institute for Social Accountability. We've been having an interesting conversation as we gear up to marking 13 years of Kenya's constitution, looking back into those 13 years and preparing ourselves for the inevitable conversation. What areas do we need to bolster our constitution? Thank you very much for watching Newsline. My name is Eric Latif. Do have a lovely